Yes, we are back and raring and ready to go. It is the first episode of the Shutdown Inning Podcast of the off season officially because we have a World Series champion that was crowned. We're gonna get into it. We haven't talked since game
Game
two after
two.
game two, so a
Yeah.
lot to get into, Tyler.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Yeah. We have a champion. I think, I'm okay with it. I feel like a lot of people are still holding on to a few years ago, but, congrats to the Houston Astros. Um, I think, their roster is amazing. It's no surprise they were there. I know we'll get into Dusty a little bit, but,
Mhm.
you know, um, yeah, I mean, what were your impressions of the World Series as a
I thought,
whole?
yeah, and I know you and I have talked about this on Coffee in the Cove the other day. For those that don't know, it's a Giants Chatter production. Shout out to Eric. But we
Yeah,
talked
follow
about,
us on Giants Chatter.
yeah,
But yeah, we
yeah.
got into it a little bit.
I like the variation, and I think we talked a lot about the variation in this World Series. It wasn't a boring World Series. It wasn't a bland World Series with one thing happening. It wasn't all homers. It wasn't all pitching. There's a nice blend of everything. There was good situational hitting. I know we talked about like the hit and run in game one. The Astros kind of, were hitting little ground balls up the middle. I know Jeremy Pena had one last night in game six, but so many variations. And I think one of the games that we didn't get to touch on because it had already happened and we were going to wait to record this was game three when the Phillies went out there and hit like what, five homers as a
Five
team.
homers. Yeah. Yeah.
And they won 7-0, and they just completely jumped on Lance McCullers. So that's one that happened, and then there's a combined no hitter. So all this stuff happening, I really like the variation of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we had an epic comeback game one. We had home run record game three, no hitter. Take it for however you want to, with it being a combined no, but still, like a once in a lifetime thing for most baseball fans to watch. And then, we had uh, an awesome team as a whole, as a roster, come through, and
Mhm.
I don't think anyone's too surprised that they pulled it out. I was hoping for a game seven. I've said that pretty much every time you and I have talked, but you know, and also I think for the Astros too, a lot of people, like I said, hold on to 5 years ago, but who's left? Altuve, Bregman, Gurriel, maybe, and Gurriel hasn't,
Yeah, he had to
so
get removed off the postseason roster because of an injury. So it was those three, and then also Verlander and McCullers, I think. But that
yeah,
was it.
but
I mean, they're all gone.
yeah, so hopefully some people can just kind of get over it. I'm sure it's a little harder for Dodgers fans. It's probably easy for, non-Dodgers fans to say that. I'd
Mm-hmm.
still probably be a little salty about 2017, but this is more or less a different ball club. And but yeah, as we were talking about, a little bit of everything in the series, which I think, was made it for an entertaining series. There's something for everybody, and I think, with everything that kind of happened, it will be one that people remember for quite a while.
Yeah, and their second championship in franchise history. And you mentioned the first one. I think that I think they feel that this is kind of, a break a little bit from the noise. They've
Hmm.
heard it for the last 3 years how they're cheaters, and that I don't think it's going to be gone. I think we're
No.
still going to hear that narrative for a long time. Um, but I do think that this eases it a little bit to where they could tell themselves, hey, we are really good and we don't need the technology. So, I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know if you saw Lance McCullers' speech post game. He was like, we've dealt with all this stuff, these last 3 years, and here we go. We did it. And I think it's really cool that they bonded over that. They
Yeah.
know they're hated and they still
Yeah.
won. So I think baseball does need a bad guy sometimes, and sometimes that bad guy needs to come out on top just to humble everybody else. So.
Yeah, I saw an interview with Dusty before yesterday's game, and he was saying, how challenging it's been for the team as a whole, being booed wherever they go. And, like we said, 20, 21 guys on the roster weren't even on the team back in 17. So they're having to deal with this, and they weren't even part of the scandal, a few
Mhm.
years back. And so I think it probably brought them a lot closer, not having to go through a lot of that together. And so they probably do see it as validation, as see we are a good team. We're not just drumming on trash cans to make it work.
Yeah, and what did you think about that no hitter? Because everybody gets on combined no hitters. It's just something that, and is it as significant as one guy doing it? I don't think anybody would argue that it's not, but
Yeah.
it's a no hitter. It's a no hitter, and there's still something cool in seeing a
Yeah,
team just not give up any hits.
yeah. I mean, and I know we mentioned it the other day, but the day after they hit 5 home runs, so you had a team that was obviously, hitting well, and the next day they couldn't even get a base hit. And I think it's just so rare in the playoffs in general. I think isn't it just Halladay and Larson before
Mm-hmm.
this one?
Yep.
Only one of them was in the World Series. It was a perfect game, obviously, but when you get to the playoffs, you're talking about the best of the best are playing. So the best pitchers, but also, the best lineups. And so to, on the biggest stage, shut a team down. Some people said that Dusty should have let him keep going. But it's like, your mission here is to win a World Series, not
Yeah.
to give a guy a shot to achieve, immortality. It's the team's immortality to become the champion. And so I had no problem with Dusty lifting him when he did. If he leaves him in and he gives up a couple knocks and then we have a ball game, then people talk about Dusty not knowing how to manage in the World Series. So he was damned if he did, damned if he didn't. And he did. He got the no hitter. They got the win, and now they're world champions. So
Yeah. He
can't
was at
knock it.
97 pitches, I mean, it was
Yeah.
not like if there's maybe, a guy like, I don't know, a right-handed hitter, maybe you're at the bottom of your order and you got a right-handed hitter coming up. Maybe you stick him out there for one more hitter, but then
Yeah,
you
but you're
fall
not
into
gonna
the,
you're not gonna
yeah,
let him go nine. He's not gonna go all nine. So at
no.
that point, you manage the game to win that game, and that's when like you said,
Mm.
97 pitches in, get to the pen, let those guys do what they've done all year, and shut them down. And I think that was the second no hitter that was started by Javier and shut
Yeah.
down by Presley this year. So
Yeah. They did it
if
in New
it,
York at Yankee Stadium. They no
yeah,
hit the Yankees.
if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Go get that W.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think 97 pitches through 6 innings, like you just said, that's going to be combined no hitter regardless. Um,
Yeah.
and, the Astros, Joe Davis said it last night, they have a historically good bullpen.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's interesting that these two teams and the Phillies, they wouldn't be where they are without their bullpen. And their bullpen was horrible, the last
Yeah.
few years. Like in that COVID shortened year, it was up there with one of the worst of all time in the modern era.
Yeah.
So, and hats off to the Phillies. I think we should mention that. They
Yeah.
played, they had a really good run. They got hot at the right time. They snuck in. They went through a lot of adversity with their manager being fired, Harper going down, and I think it's right to just give them some props.
Yeah, I mean, Castellanos didn't have the year that he had last year, so he didn't
Mhm.
quite deliver. So the way that they were able to kind of, they made it, there. And I think, they just, I forget the exact stat, but they scored like 5 runs over the last like 30 innings or something stupid like that. They ran into a better ball club, and so that's why that better ball club was holding up the trophy last night.
Yeah, and I think Eric Nathanson mentioned it perfectly. He said, the Phillies scored those runs in game one, to come back from the 5-run deficit, and then they hit the home runs and they hit the home runs in game three, and then that was all the offense they had.
Yeah.
Hoskins didn't hit, Castellanos didn't hit. I think Gene Segura didn't really hit either. It was Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber carrying the
Yeah.
load. So,
Yeah.
but they'll be back though. Houston will too.
Yeah.
So,
Oh yeah.
and the big
I don't think either of these ball clubs are going anywhere.
Not at all. In that division, both divisions are good too. I think I'm so interested in the American, and we'll get to it when we do like series predict or season predictions and stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm so excited for the American League West. I think it's been pretty underrated for a while now, but now you get Bochy in Texas with the prospect of them like spending more money this offseason. Maybe the Angels, I feel like as much as we stink on them, they always I feel like could be competitive with the Switch. I
Yeah,
don't
they
know.
have they have the talent. So if
Yeah.
they could just find that magic you need, to put it together. I mean, I hope they do at some point, because I'm going to be really disappointed if they waste Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout's
Yeah.
primes.
Yeah. But the
Um,
Astros have it in. That's the main point.
yeah, and then you have Seattle too.
Yeah.
I think the only real stinker right now is the A's, and I don't think they'll be spending too much money until they know where they're going to be for the foreseeable future. So, but
Mhm.
you have 4 teams that you know, you could argue you wouldn't be surprised if they win the division. And then kind of similar in the NL East, you got the Mets, the Braves, the Phillies, the Nats and the Marlins the Marlins have shown they can be kind of a sneaky team. They have a lot of
Yeah.
good young talent down there.
A lot of good
Um,
young arms. It's not easy to go
yeah,
in there and win a 3-game set in Miami nowadays.
yeah,
They
yeah.
could outpitch you.
So, like we said, both these teams are good. They'll be around for a while, but it's not like they're going to have a cakewalk to get into the postseason every year either. So, but I
Was your
think,
Don Alvarez's home run? Was that the swing of the series for you?
oh, I think it had to be. It was almost like, we've talked about it a few times here and elsewhere, but it was similar to the Renteria home run in
That's
10.
what it
Like
felt.
once that
Yeah.
swing was out, once that ball went out, you're like, okay, it's done. I think they tacked on an extra run after that, and holy crap, what a shot that was over the batter's
Hmm.
eye in dead center field, 450 to dead center. You don't see that every day. And so,
And that place was loud. I don't know if yeah, of course it's going to be loud when that happens, but like even 20 seconds after, that place still
yeah.
hadn't calmed down. In
Yeah, I think this
Houston,
was the first series where the home team clinched on their home field since 2013 too.
a
So
long time, yeah.
that's always fun to see for me. I think it's
Yeah.
more fun for the players too to be able to celebrate in front of their
Yeah.
hometown crowd.
Just think about that for a second. Think about like all the moments during the regular season, like all these moments that we as baseball fans perceive as big. A guy hits a walk-off home run, the place is going nuts. Even in the first round of
Yeah,
the playoffs, they win the first playoff series, everybody's going ballistic. But none of it doesn't compare. It all doesn't compare to winning a championship at home.
yeah.
Like I can't imagine what that place sounded like. So
Yeah, I wonder how long it took the crowd to clear out of there. Usually, the last almost 10 years we've seen them, whoever clinches on the road. And so usually there's like a
mhm.
section or two where everyone kind of funnels down behind the dugout to celebrate with their team, the people that traveled. I wonder how long the party was going inside the ballpark in Houston last night. But I'd be interested to see. I don't know if you saw in game 3 when I think it was Harper's home run and Baum's home run. They registered on like the seismic readings, almost like a mini earthquake in
Oh wow.
Philadelphia, where like the city was shaking. And I'd be interested to see when Alvarez's home run went out yesterday, if there was probably something similar in Houston.
God, that ball was crushed,
Yeah,
demolished, and he's so
yeah,
balanced, especially against left-handed pitching. And I mean, he's so underrated too. We think about a lot of big left-handed hitters in the game, and we don't normally name him, but now I think we're starting to. We're gonna name Jordan.
he was
We're gonna
amazing all
notice,
year.
yeah, we're
Yeah,
gonna notice Jeremy Pena now. We're gonna, that's the good thing about the postseason is it puts some of the guys that we don't know in the spotlight. So I think
yeah.
that's
I
really
think
cool.
Pena became the third rookie to win the World Series MVP.
Hmm.
A pretty funny clip on MLB Network after the game where Carlos Correa was in the studio interviewing Jeremy Pena, guy who basically took his job in Houston. But that's what's awesome, like you said, about the postseason. Guys that become
Tucker,
household
yeah.
names. They're if you're not following every other team and you watch the World Series, you get to learn who some of these new guys are, and especially guys like Alvarez and Pena. They're going to be around
Mhm.
for a while now, so now these guys are going to be on everybody's radar.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And speaking of radar, Dusty Baker. I mean, you touched on it a little bit. He gets his first championship in like what 25 plus years of managing, almost 30
Yeah.
years. And
Yeah, almost 2,100 career wins, the winningest manager without a ring, and now that's somebody else. I don't even know
Gene
who it is,
Mock,
but
Gene Mock, formerly of the Angels, now has
okay, that
that
great distinction.
yeah. But and I don't think
But
Gene Mock's ever going to manage again. But yeah, congrats to Dusty. Good to
yeah,
see.
I mean, I think he's someone that a lot of Giants fans relate to. And he's I remember Roger Craig, but when I started to really understand baseball, Dusty was the manager. And, he, I tweeted it earlier, he's not a perfect manager, but no one really is, and he made some questionable moves in the past in all of his stops. But, a guy who is good enough to stick around for 25 years, win almost 2,100 games, hard not to be happy for the guy. And like, I was just like watching videos of him celebrating last night.
Mhm.
Like he was doing the beer luge, he was popping bottles, he was partying just like he was a player. And so that was really awesome to watch.
I don't know if he knows the magnitude of it yet. I feel like there's a point in time when, guys kind of in the same spot that he's in, they have time to like reflect. Maybe they're in a quiet space at
Mm-hmm.
home or something, and they go, wow, that just happened. I don't think last night he really understood. He was still harping on, yeah, the players did this, but everybody was just so happy for him.
Oh, he got
And
mobbed in the dugout.
yeah.
I loved that clip too. That was really fun to watch. I think for a lot of people, players, managers, whoever, I think it hits them a lot at like the parade whenever that'll happen down in
Mhm.
Houston, because you see like hundreds of thousands, if not a million plus people packing the streets. And I think that's where it'll probably hit like, holy crap, we did this.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Um,
I saw the same videos that you did of him celebrating. He seems like just such a genuine guy, who, and I know this gets overstated, maybe a little bit too much, but he really did clean up the mess there. And he
yeah.
really did come in there with a brand new perspective on things.
Yeah. It wasn't an easy job to take
Not at
for
all. I mean,
anybody.
it was just a media mess.
Hmm.
Everything about that was horrible. You had to answer questions on it the entire 2020 season. COVID happened. I mean, just everything that he was faced and he was up against. And I can't blame him for taking the job. It's a
Yeah.
big league job, and
Yeah.
he has no ties to it. So
And even in
good.
like in the 2020 season, a lot of, when you're connecting with your players, a lot of that, it was hard for him to do that because all the player meetings were
Mhm.
like we are right now, on Zoom or FaceTime. So definitely was a tough situation to go into, and he jumped in, and you know,
Yeah, think of all the times he got so close. 2002 with all the 5-run leads, we heard about that plenty. We don't need to get into it again, but
no,
2000, '02, and then he had that really good team in '93 where they came so close to a playoff berth, and '97 was a big year, and 2000 and
he
all
had
these
some really
times
good Cubs teams.
good Cubs
You
teams.
know,
'03 was so close to a World Series.
yeah,
And then we know what happened with the ball down the line, which I don't think would have been caught, but that's maybe a thing for a different day. Uh,
yeah,
but yeah, came so close. Cincinnati, they had some good teams in like the early 2010s. Um, I think he made it to the playoffs with the Nationals one year, so he's been there, but he's
yeah.
never climbed Everest, and now he
Yeah,
has.
and yeah, like I said, despite what you think about him managerially, I've met him once or twice, and he was just a really, like you said, he's a down to earth, really awesome person that, in the brief time I got to talk to him. And so a guy that, has been a baseball lifer, he played a whole career, and that he's been managing 25. So congratulations to Dusty.
Yeah, and it seems, just to wrap it up, it seems like he's like the older guys that are kind of being brought back into the game now. We talked a lot about Bochy in the first episode. It seems like Dusty's a good representation of what managers do with their players. Now it's like almost like he's there, he's a leader on the team, but he lets them kind of do what they want, and
Hmm.
it seems like they have fun, and no, just a fun team to watch this year. So deep in a lot of different ways, and um, yeah, congrats to the
Yeah,
Astros, and congrats to Dusty. Very well deserved.
yeah, definitely. And I think just kind of talking about some of the older managers that are still finding jobs. I think it's showing that obviously analytics are huge now. And I think it just shows that you still need to have a balance. You need to have a manager that can trust his gut a little bit sometimes, and not always just do what the spreadsheet
Mhm.
says, so to speak. So, having that balance, having that experience that players will trust, with some of these older guys that have been around the game for so long.
I think
So,
it's even more important to communicate. I think that's honestly that, because like we know that like everybody's like, oh well, in-game decisions, it's almost like a robotic feel now for managers. You could
mhm.
basically be a robot and make a pitching change, and figure out that a lefty's coming up and get the lefty warming up. But what you can't really teach, and there's no stat for this, it's like the ability to communicate with your players. How are you feeling today? Are you available to pitch 3 days in a row today out of the bullpen? It's stuff like that. And hey, you're gonna get bounced to the bottom of the order, I guess. So the
Yeah.
communication between the players, I think that's
Yeah.
what teams are hiring on now, I think.
Yeah, the communication and kind of the trust and respect that it garners. So you can tell your manager if you need a day off, or whatever the situation may be, that you can have that open communication with your skipper, and not feel like you're letting your team down or yourself down or your manager down.
Yeah, and I think a minor thing, and this is the one that I feel like needs to be I'm not running a team by any means and I probably shouldn't be, but I feel like they need to be good with the media too, right? They got to be able to like be the face of the team, be the face of decisions on the field.
Mm-hmm.
Just like GMs are with
Roster
transactions and
moves. Yeah.
roster moves and stuff like that. They have to be able to because I mean, just like politicians, I know we don't want to go down that route. You got to be able to talk, and
Yeah.
you got to be able to sell stuff. And I feel like that's an aspect that we don't talk enough about with managers and in the media. So
Yeah.
Dusty does it though. So
Yeah. And yeah, so yeah, congrats to the Astros, congrats to Dusty and all the team down in Houston. But to kind of pivot to our next
mhm.
topic, Dusty played back in the day, played a little after, but a guy named Willie Mays who has a documentary dropping on HBO Max. I think it's Tuesday. Is it tomorrow or Tuesday? I think it's the
It
8th.
was either the 7th or the 8th. So
Either
yeah.
way, I'm excited to check that out. Like he's only, I think he's done one authorized book and now he's doing this authorized documentary. He's in the promos for it. He had a say in it. He was interviewed for it. And he's not just a Giants icon, he's an American icon, not even kind of even outside of the game of baseball. And so I'm really interested to see what they show in this documentary, what we kind of learn about Willie and kind of his situations in his career that he had to go through. Yeah, I mean, I know he's
Mhm.
before both of our time, but how are you? Are you jazzed for this thing?
100% jazz for this thing. I'm gonna get the free subscription for HBO Max just to watch this. Um,
Don't forget to cancel after 7 days.
yes, of course. But I mean, you hit the nail on the head. You can't write American history. You can't write the story of American history without Willie Mays. And that sounds a little too much considering that he only played baseball. He wasn't like huge on speaking out on social justice or social issues, but I guess not outspoken as much as his colleagues, Hank Aaron and Jackie Robinson, of course. But he's just as important as a lot of those guys who, a lot of the black players that played in that era. And he was
Mm-hmm.
one of the first ones to come in and just be a star. And he did it with such, everybody that I've talked to say that he's done it with such joy and excite. I'm trying to piece together the words here
Yeah,
because there's so many. He's so exciting, and I mentioned it on Coffee and the Cove, but Reggie Jackson summed it up perfectly at the beginning of that promo. Willie Mays the most spectacular player to ever play the game, and that's what we
yeah,
hear so much. And we could talk about the goats all we want: Babe Ruth, Willie Mays, Barry, Griffey, all these players. But Willie Mays is the GOAT, man. He's the
yeah.
one. Nobody will ever pass him, I think, at least in the near future. Um, Somebody who
I mean,
still relevant to this day in San Francisco. We see him at all the
uh,
events. Would always see him sitting next to Big Mac, McCovey, and Juan Marichal, Gaylord Perry. Seeing all those guys just was a symbol for a lot of Giants fans everywhere. And
yeah,
Mays always got the loudest cheers, and I think it's important that this generation, my generation, maybe a little bit older than me, maybe a little bit younger than me, use this as an opportunity to get to know Willie Mays and get to know who he was and who he is. So I'm
yeah. I
excited.
mean, yeah, he got he could do everything. He was like
Mhm.
the ultimate five-tool player, and he was just fun to watch. It's not like he just went out and did it kind of in a bland way. He
Mhm.
did it. He was entertaining. He was fun to watch. He had like a yeah, just the you could just tell he loved playing baseball. It wasn't a job to
Mhm.
him. You know, it was something he loved to do. And so I think that was really,
Mhm.
even though I didn't get to see him play, I wish I could have, but I think that's something that I've always kind of felt about him. And for those of you that aren't Giants fans, you know, there's an energy in the park when Willie Mays is there. It's just like you're
100%.
in the presence of greatness, like legit greatness. And just knowing that like Willie Mays is in the, could be hundreds of feet from you watching the same game you're watching, or he's out on the field, during a ceremony. It's like, it's just kind of takes you back. It's like that is Willie Mays. And I'm glad he's still, still around, still, doing
Yeah.
his thing. He's 91, 92.
Mhm.
Um,
And he's
it's
doing
always,
this, he's taking part in this documentary, and it tells you that, he's still thinking good and he could still recall some of these big moments from his career. And, kind of how everything happened in his eyes. So
Yeah.
that's a cool thing that they were able to interview him. And there's an arrogance about him that's so spectacular with the confidence that he has in himself as a player, and there's a tease at the end of that promo, and the interviewer asked if he's the best player ever, and I have no doubt that he's going to answer with absolutely. Until anybody comes and does what he has done on a baseball field, there's been people that have hit more home runs than him. There's people that have had more hits than him, knocked in more runs, thrown out more base runners, stolen more bases, but there's nobody that has done it with as much flair together like Willie
Yeah.
Mays has. So
Yeah, I think he'll either say absolutely, or I think it was Brooks said it on Coffee and the Co. Or he'll say like, "What do you think?" Like,
yeah,
you've seen all these guys play. What do you think? Do you think I'm
yeah.
not the best player ever? It kind of, I think if he throws it back, it'll be kind of, do you think I'm not? you
And
know?
he's allowed to
Oh,
say whatever he
absolutely.
wants. I mean, he could be as cocky as possible, and I don't think anybody would care. It would just light into, and I know we're kind of recapping what we said on Coffee and the Cove, but for those that didn't hear, the best thing about Willie Mays and people that played in that era is that there's no videos for everything all the time. So we had to hear about Willie Mays through loved ones and family and friends, and like the oral truth, or the oral stories that came through and are still filtering down to this day. And I think that's really cool. And Eric mentioned the good one of with the hat that was maybe a few sizes too big, and he would do that purposely so it would fly off, giving the entertainment factor. And the basket catch, we
Yeah.
know about the catch in the World Series in 1954. We know about all the homers and him running into Bobby Bonds against the fence at Candlestick, but some of the other mythical tales that are told may not ever be confirmed, but they're just fun. We
Yeah.
could live through them. So I appreciate that aspect of guys that played in that era.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and so I think we're both really looking forward to that documentary. So I thought it'd be fun to maybe say, what are some other players from baseball history we'd want to see a similar documentary of? And I've got a couple in mind. Are there anyone that jumps out to you that you think would be an interesting doc, or someone you just want to learn more about?
Yeah, so this actually came to light when the Jeter documentary came out too. And there's like Jordan, The Last Dance happened. I love The Last Dance. It was fantastic. And then it got everybody thinking, oh, who is going to be the next athlete to have a 10-part series about them? Now it's rare to have a 10-part series, but I think they're doing it right with this Maze thing where it's maybe an hour and 30 minutes. I don't know how long exactly it is, but
Yeah.
Jeter got the 10-part series. Very few, could handle that. But I will say that, if we're talking strictly documentary, Pete Rose has to be up there. I mean, Pete Rose has lived a baseball life that not many people can compare to.
Hmm.
Great player coming up, growing up in Ohio, came up with those really great Reds teams, and there's so much variety with those Reds teams with how they would win games. And Rose was kind of the hustle guy. He was a singles
Charlie
hitter,
Hustle.
Charlie Hustle, singles hitter. It's not like he was fast or anything, but had like that hustle speed.
Yeah.
I kind of see it a little bit in Mike Yastrzemski a little bit with the hustle speed type of thing.
Hmm.
The hit king, right? He's beloved everywhere. And then all of a sudden his life, kind of takes a twirl when he's a manager of the Reds and the whole betting on baseball thing happens. And now he's the villain, and I think everybody likes a good villain story as much as we don't like to admit it or do.
Hmm.
And now he's out of the game. He's older now. I think this would be a good time for a Pete Rose documentary. He's doing a few different things. I know he's doing a podcast. I think he is. It's weird to say this, but he's still one of baseball's biggest ambassadors. He's in the public like 6 hours, a few times a week, talking about
Hmm.
baseball and signing autographs and stuff. So as much as baseball wouldn't like to admit it, he's doing a service for them. So I'd be interested to hear about him. And, as long as his contemporaries from that time are still around and still kicking it, I think that would be a really good one. What about you?
Yeah. One that comes to my mind is Cal Ripken Jr. He was
Mm.
probably him and Griffey were my two favorite non-Giants growing up. And I think just kind of the longevity he had, let alone the longevity while playing every single day. I'm sure there's, just the drive you have to do that while playing a position like shortstop at the major league level. I'm sure, there's some stories of like stuff he played through that has never come out. And then also he was also just like a beloved player his whole career. You never really heard a bad story about the guy. And I just think he's, an iconic player. I think hit some of his accomplishments on the field get overshadowed by the streak. He hit a lot of home runs for a shortstop. He was, decent with the glove. I think he won a couple gold gloves, if I'm not mistaken. So I think kind of making sure that people recognize that he wasn't just the streak would be really cool to see too.
And he reinvented the position. Like he was like the first big shortstop, and now they're
Yeah.
all over the place. You see him everywhere. A-Rod was a big guy.
We're gonna see like 5 of them sign this offseason somewhere. Like
Correa's pretty big, and there's so much talk about all the big short. Tulowitzki was a big guy too. So he like paved the way for those big 6'3", 6'4" shortstops who are now in the game, and baseball family too, coming from a baseball family. That's a good choice. There's a lot of content there that you could touch with Cal Ripken Jr. So I like that one.
I mean, you could even get into a little bit with like you said, the family. His dad was his manager for a while. He played with his brother. You could probably get some interesting clips from Billy Ripken talking about being Cal Ripken's little brother and how that kind of impacted his career.
And what they're doing now too with Ripken baseball. It's one of the most popular like coaching, and now they have like a I just saw it recently where they're opening like facilities across the country, like Ripken baseball fields that are so beautiful. So, I mean, they're still giving back to the community now. And I mean, just listen how Derek Jeter talks about Ripken and all these guys that loved him growing up. So that's a good pick. And speaking of shortstops and speaking of villains, A-Rod was the other one that I had. And I feel like this might be a little too early. I think that there's a lot more A-Rod that, I don't know if he sticks on TV for the next 10 years. I see him doing something else pretty soon in baseball. I don't know what it is, but I don't see him in TV for much longer. I think he's going to do something else. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's going to try and be a part of an ownership group in MLB. I know he's got the whole things with.
He's tried that a couple times, right?
Yeah.
He's been rumored to.
He's got the whole thing with the Timberwolves in the NBA. I think he's he's part of the ownership group there, but talk about a villain. I mean, this guy another guy like Pete Rose, who went from beloved, everybody said, and people still say that he's the best high school player to ever come out of Florida. And just this young 18-year-old in the big leagues, with some really good players around him, with Randy Johnson and Jay Buhner and Ken Griffey Jr. on all those good Mariner teams, Edgar Martinez. Yeah. And then, the whole thing happens with, the big contract, and he signs this huge contract with Texas. Doesn't really, work out, doesn't want to be there. I think the Rangers didn't really commit to anybody after him, which pissed him off. And then the whole Yankees thing and moving to third base, and then the relationship with Jeter, and then the biogenesis and the steroids. Oh, can you imagine that documentary? That would be so awesome to see. J-Lo, the personal life stuff. I mean, you could go down a rabbit hole with him.
Yeah, he's one that you could. I don't think he'd garner a 10-parter like Jeter, but you could do like probably 5 or 6 pretty solid, episodes on A-Rod, just because, I remember when he came up, like you said, he was an 18, 19-year-old kid. I got to see him play in the Kingdome his rookie year, which was, really cool to see. And then, just to kind of watch him go from, everybody loves him to, he even had a hard time finding, like Yankees fans or Rangers fans later in his career who he just kind of got beat up in the public eye, no matter what he did. And so, I think that's a solid pick as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God. Yeah. He's an interesting one. Do you have another one?
Yeah, I'm going to go Homer on this one. I'm going to say Tim Lincecum. I just think he's such an interesting dude. He's very private, which he has every right to be. So I would never expect anything. Maybe he'll do a small one for like a Bay Area station 20 years from now or something. But he's just he was the freak. He was a freak of an athlete. I heard, I think there's the story that, I think it was in high school, he decided he wanted to play golf, I think it was. And so he picked up golf clubs for the first time. And like 2 weeks later, he made the varsity golf team, and he was just always, he looks like a normal guy. He never, if he walked past you on the street and you didn't know who he was, you'd just be like, okay, there's another, average guy. He was, really kind of personable with people. Everybody kind of loved him. And so I just love to kind of learn more about like what made him tick, what still makes him tick, and just kind of learn more about him. But, a lot of Giants fans want to see more of him. I get where he's coming from, just kind of doing his own thing, and staying to himself. But he's definitely a guy that I would like to learn more about if he ever so chooses.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And he's someone that like I think he was way before his time in terms of like athlete persona. There's a lot more baseball players that are like him now than when he was playing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
kind of the sneaky intelligent, the very laid back. A lot of those guys were just like North Carolina redneck or something like that. There are still many of those, but now I think it's a little bit more diversified. And when I was trying to come, and I think what we should do, Tyler, is we should put this out there on Twitter and ask, what people want to see in terms of documentaries and subjects. And I think that would be a really cool like poll to ask people. And because when I was trying to figure out who I wanted to pick, I was like, God, well, it can't be always the best player, right? Because
Yeah.
like if we're picking Buster Posey, for example, it would be just so generic. Even though he's got the championships, it would be, kid growing up in Georgia, high school baseball, college baseball, great big league career. Like there's nothing that really stands out in terms of like like Hollywood. You have to have some kind of Hollywood aspect to it. Not saying that
Yeah.
Buster Posey's career was like lame. It obviously wasn't. But
Yeah.
there's got to be that it factor in terms of like entertainment, and the
Yeah.
person you're doing it on, so
Yeah, I think Timmy too. He had an interesting relationship with his dad. His dad basically taught him how to pitch, and so I think there's some good, nuggets in there. So, like you said, he's something a little different, where it's not just like, yeah, this guy was great from the beginning. Growing up, we knew he was going to be great, and then he was great. Okay, cool.
yeah.
Like, so yeah, yeah, I think we should definitely, if you're listening,
Mhm.
comment on the tweet or whatever, let us know, and then we'll hopefully we can get a clip out, but to kind of, I'd love to see who some other people would love to see documentaries of.
Yeah, and Josh Hamilton, by the way, real quick, that would have been another good one. And I know Hamilton's run into like some legal trouble since then, and probably not a good idea now because I don't know if we'd want to be promoting him at this point. He had some uh, allegations against him recently, but just the whole, that's a good example of somebody who would, without all that recent stuff, would be a good subject. A guy
Yeah.
who is supposed to be hyped up as a kid to be like the best player to ever play the game, Hall of Famer. He's drafted, and then he has just a breakdown, and he gets addicted to alcohol and drugs, and he's out of the game. He's suspended from the game, and then he's brought back, Rule 5 pick, MVP. All
Yeah.
the success, then he goes back down, and just stuff like that. So it needs to. Hollywood needs to be interested.
Yeah.
It's not just going to pick up a documentary from a player who had a really good career. There's got to be some kind of it factor or story. So I'm interested to see what people would say too.
Yeah. Yeah. Let us know, and we'll put something out too, specifically to ask. But if you're listening, and give us a shout. Let us know what you're thinking.
Yeah, 100%. Well, 38 minutes, man. We were
All
trying to
right.
get these down.
We're trying to hit the 30-minute sweet spot for everybody, but
Yeah, well, don't worry. If you see the duration on these before you watch, they're not all going to be this long. We're still kind of getting our groove and seeing how many subjects are feasible for this podcast that we could fit into a listenable, I guess, window. So
yeah, I'm sure you guys could listen to us talk forever, but we don't want to take up your whole day or anything.
yeah, yeah. Tyler's
But
got the kid.
yeah.
I am a kid. So
But yeah, coming up, we'll have some the hot stove to talk about.
love
I think
guests.
there's like a 4 or 5 day freeze right now before anything can really happen, and then we need some dominoes to fall, the top free agents to sign, qualifying offers to go out, and then we'll really start to see some action and see some movement and see what some of the teams for next year are going to look like. So definitely going to have some fun stuff to talk about coming up.
Yeah, excited to see how all that works. And we got a few guests lined up, so should be a lot of fun. Well,
Yeah, I guess you could say we shut it down again.
yeah, we did. We threw an immaculate inning today. So,
We had a combined shutdown inning.
oh, now it's not as significant.
Oh,
Uh, All right, Tyler. Well, this was a lot of fun. And again, you guys could follow the podcast on Twitter at shutdown_inning. And then on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you find your podcast, we are on. And we will see you next time.
Thank you, everybody.